The amber fields of New Harmony stretched endlessly under a golden sky. And Dr. Elena Vasquez watched her daughter Maya run through the tall grass with the other children, their laughter carried by the warm wind that swept across the colony. World Elena smiled and pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders. This planet had become home to over 2 million humans in just 30 years. And every day she felt grateful that her family had made the journey from Earth to build a new life among the stars. The year was 2347, and humanity had spread across dozens of worlds since leaving their home planet 2 centuries ago. They had met 17 different alien species during their expansion, and most of those meetings had been peaceful enough. Though humans quickly learned that the galaxy was not a friendly place, the older races looked down on humanity. They called them young and weak and unimportant, just another species crawling out of their cradle world to play among the stars. Most humans had accepted this position and tried to make friends where they could while avoiding the more dangerous empires. The Vreth Dominion was one of those dangerous empires. Elena had heard stories about the Vreth her whole life. They were an ancient race that had ruled their corner of the galaxy for thousands of years, and they believed that younger species existed only to serve or be destroyed. Their territory bordered human space, and tensions had been growing for years as human colonies expanded closer to their borders. Harmony sat right at the edge of that border, and Elena sometimes worried about what that meant for her family. But the United Terran government had assured all colonists that diplomatic talks were ongoing, and there was no reason to fear. She called out to Maya as the sun began to set, telling her daughter it was time to go home for dinner. Maya complained the way all 8-year-old children complain, but she ran back to her mother and took her hand, and together they walked toward their small house on the edge of the settlement. That night, Elena put Maya to bed and read her a story about brave explorers discovering new worlds. Maya fell asleep with a smile on her face, dreaming of adventures among the stars. And Elena kissed her forehead and whispered that she loved her. She never got the chance to say it again. The attack came without warning. 3 hours later, Elena woke to sirens screaming across the colony, and through her window she saw the sky filled with ships. Not human ships, but Vreth warships. Hundreds of them hanging in the darkness like monsters waiting to feed. She grabbed Maya from her bed and ran outside, joining thousands of other colonists who stared up at the sky in terror. Some people were screaming, others were praying, and the colony defense forces were scrambling to reach their ships. New Harmony had 12 defense vessels. They were small and old and meant to handle pirates, not a full invasion fleet. Elena watched them rise into the sky to meet the enemy, and she watched them die in balls of fire that lit up the night. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. Then the bombardment began. First strike hit the capital city 20 kilometers away, and Elena saw a pillar of fire rise into the clouds. The ground shook beneath her feet, and Maya screamed and buried her face in her mother's chest. Elena ran. She did not know where she was running to, but she ran anyway, carrying her daughter through streets filled with panicking people. Explosions bloomed across the horizon in every direction, and the heat grew worse with every passing second. She found a shelter built into a hillside and pushed inside with dozens of other families. Children were crying, and adults were trying to contact anyone who might help. But all communications were jammed. For 6 hours they huddled in that shelter while the world burned above. Elena held Maya and told her everything would be okay. She told her that help was coming, that Earth would send ships, that they just had to be brave a little longer. She lied because that is what mothers do when there is nothing else they can do. The shelter walls began to crack as the bombardment grew closer. Maya looked up at her mother with tears in her eyes and asked if they were going to die. Elena could not answer, so she just held her daughter tighter and closed her eyes. The last thing she felt was heat. The Vreth were thorough in their work. They did not simply attack military targets or government buildings, but instead they burned everything. Every city was reduced to glass. Every town was erased. Every farm and forest and field was scorched until nothing remained, but ash. They called it purification. And they had done it to dozens of younger species throughout their long history. It was how they taught lessons to those who did not know their place in the galaxy. Arkham Thalvex stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the planet die below him. He was tall and gray-skinned with 4 eyes that reflected the flames consuming New Harmony, and he felt nothing but satisfaction at what he saw. These humans had been warned. They had been told to stop expanding toward Wreath space, but they had not listened. Now they would learn what happened to vermin who did not obey their betters. He ordered his communications officer to prepare a message for Earth. And when the recording began, he spoke with cold certainty. Humans of Earth, look upon this world and understand what you are. You are nothing. You have always been nothing, and you will always be nothing. We have cleansed this colony of your filth as a mercy, to show you the consequences of your arrogance. Crawl back to your single star and remain there, or every world you touch will share this fate. The Vreth Dominion has spoken. He ended the recording and ordered his fleet to depart. There was no need to remain, for there was nothing left worth destroying below them. New Harmony continued to burn. And in the ashes of a hillside shelter, a mother still held her daughter in her arms. 2,300,000 humans died that day. Men and women and children who had come to the stars seeking a better life. They died because an ancient empire decided they were insects to be crushed. Earth received the message 3 days later, along with footage recovered from orbital satellites that had survived the attack. Galaxy watched and waited to see how humanity would respond to this lesson. They expected fear and submission. They had no idea what was coming. The Great Hall of the United Terran Government had never been so quiet. Every seat was filled with representatives from every human world, and every eye was fixed on the massive screen that showed the final moments of New Harmony. Chancellor Marcus Webb stood at the podium and watched the footage with the rest of them. He saw cities burning and people running and ships falling from the sky, and he felt something cold settle in his chest. The recording ended with the message from Archon Thalvex. His alien face twisted with contempt as he called humanity vermin and insects. When the screen went dark, the silence continued, broken only by the sound of someone weeping in the back of the hall. Webb gripped the podium and looked out at his people. These were leaders and scientists and soldiers who had guided humanity through 2 centuries of expansion among the stars. And now they all looked to him for answers. He spoke slowly and clearly so that every word would be heard. 2,300,000 of our people are dead. Mothers and fathers and children who wanted nothing more than to build lives on a new world. They were murdered not because of anything they did, but because an empire older than our entire civilization decided we needed to learn our place. He paused and let the weight of those words settle over the assembly. The Vreth believe we are weak. They believe we will accept this massacre and retreat to our home system like frightened animals. They believe this because for 200 years we have shown the galaxy exactly what we wanted them to see. Confused murmurs spread through the hall, and Webb raised his hand for silence. When humanity first left Earth and encountered alien life, our ancestors made a choice. They saw how the galaxy worked, how the strong devoured the weak, how ancient empires crushed younger species without mercy. And they decided that humanity would survive by appearing harmless while building strength in secret. He pressed a button on the podium, and the screen behind him lit up with images that made several representatives gasp. Massive shipyards hidden in the asteroid belt. Weapons platforms concealed in the clouds of Jupiter. Research facilities buried beneath the surface of Mars. Everything we have shared with the galaxy has been obsolete by 3 generations. Our true fleet is not the ships they have seen patrolling our borders. Our true weapons are not the missiles they have tracked and analyzed. For 200 years we have been preparing for a day we hoped would never come. The hall erupted in noise as people shouted questions and demanded explanations. But Webb silenced them with a single raised hand. I am activating Protocol Prometheus. This is a black-level military directive created by our founders for exactly this situation. As of this moment, humanity is no longer hiding. He turned to face a woman who sat in the front row wearing the black uniform of the Terran Navy. She had silver hair and dark eyes that held no warmth, and when she stood the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Admiral Yuki Tanaka commands our first Shadow Fleet. She has been preparing for this mission her entire career, and I am giving her full authority to respond to the Vreth attack as she sees fit. Admiral Tanaka walked to the podium and looked out at the assembly. Her face showed no emotion, but those who knew her could see the steel beneath her calm exterior. The Vreth have 3 inhabited worlds in their home system. 12 billion of their kind live under the light of their star. They believe they are untouchable because no species has ever had the power to threaten them. She let those words hang in the air before continuing. They are wrong. The assembly erupted again. Some voices calling for caution and others demanding blood. Tanaka waited until they quieted before she spoke again. I will not pretend this will be clean or righteous. What we are about to do will change humanity forever, and we will carry the weight of it for generations. But the alternative is extinction, not just of our bodies, but of our spirit. If we accept what the Vreth have done, then we tell every species in the galaxy that human lives are worthless. She straightened her shoulders and her voice grew harder. I refused to send that message. The vote was held 1 hour later, and it was unanimous. Humanity would not hide any longer, and humanity would not forgive. In the weeks that followed, Earth went silent. Diplomatic channels were closed, trade ships were recalled, and communications with alien governments simply stopped. The galaxy watched this retreat with satisfaction. Believing that humanity had learned its lesson, the Vreth celebrated their victory and boasted about how easily they had broken the young species. Other empires took note and began planning how they might claim human territory for themselves. After all, if the Vreth could slaughter millions without consequence, then surely humans were fair game for anyone. None of them knew what was happening in the darkness of the outer solar system. The first Shadow Fleet assembled in the cold void beyond Neptune. 400 warships emerging from hidden docks that had been built over decades. These vessels were nothing like the ships humanity showed the galaxy. They were faster and stronger, and armed with weapons that alien scientists could not even imagine. Admiral Tanaka stood on the bridge of her flagship, the TNS Remembrance, and reviewed the mission parameters one final time. Her target was the Vreth home system, and her orders were simple total elimination. She thought about New Harmony and the people who had died there. She thought about Elena Vasquez and her daughter Maya, whose names she had memorized along with all 2,300,000 others. She would carry those names with her into battle. Her first officer approached and reported that all ships were ready to depart. Tanaka nodded and gave the order to move out as the fleet began its journey toward Vreth space. She addressed her crew over the ship-wide communication system. The Vreth wanted to teach humanity fear. They wanted us to cower and submit and accept our place at the bottom of the galactic order. Instead, they have awakened something they do not understand. Her voice was cold and steady as she continued. We are not the weak species they believe us to be. We are the descendants of people who survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed our world. We carry in our blood the legacy of every human who ever refused to surrender. She paused and looked at the stars through the bridge view screen. The galaxy is about to learn what fear actually looks like. The first Shadow Fleet moved through the void like ghosts, 400 black ships cutting through space on a course that would take them to the heart of the Vreth Dominion. They traveled faster than any vessels the galaxy had ever seen. Using drives that bent the fabric of reality itself, Admiral Yuki Tanaka sat alone in her quarters aboard the Remembrance, studying holographic maps of the Vreth home system. 3 worlds orbited their star, and all 3 were covered with cities and factories and military installations. 12 billion Vreth lived in that system, the seat of an empire that had ruled this region of space for 5,000 years. She knew what she was about to do, and the weight of it pressed down on her like a physical force. A chime at her door interrupted her thoughts, and she called for her visitor to enter. Commander David Chun stepped inside and saluted before taking the seat she offered him. "The crew is ready, Admiral. Morale is high, and everyone understands the mission." Tanaka nodded slowly and turned back to the holographic display. "Do they understand what we are asking them to become, David? Not soldiers fighting a battle, but executioners destroying an entire civilization." Chun was quiet for a moment before answering. They watched the footage from New Harmony just like everyone else. They saw what the Vreth did to our people, to our children. "I think they understand exactly what we are about to do, and I think they have made peace with it." Tanaka closed her eyes and remembered the day she had received her orders. She had spent her entire career preparing for a war that might never come, training with weapons that existed only in classified files, commanding ships that the galaxy did not know existed. Now that day had arrived, and she felt no triumph, only a terrible sense of duty. "When I was young, my grandmother told me stories about our ancestors," she said quietly. "She told me about the bombs that fell on our cities during the old wars, about the fire that consumed hundreds of thousands in a single flash. She told me that humans were capable of terrible things when pushed too far." She opened her eyes and looked at Chun. "I never thought I would be the one to prove her right." The fleet continued its journey for 6 weeks, crossing distances that would have taken conventional ships years to travel. During that time, the crew trained and prepared, and tried not to think too much about what waited at the end of their voyage. In the cargo hold of the Remembrance sat the weapon that would end the Vreth civilization. It was called the Helios Array, and it had taken human scientists 50 years to develop. The device could destabilize a star and trigger a reaction that would consume everything within the system. It had never been tested on an inhabited world because there had never been a reason to use it. Now there was a reason. Tanaka visited the weapon once during the journey and stood before it in silence. It looked almost peaceful, a collection of silver spheres and golden rings that hummed with energy. She found it strange that something so elegant could cause so much destruction. She thought about the Vreth child who would never understand why the sky was burning, about the families who would have no time to say goodbye, about the civilization that would be erased from existence. She thought about all of it, and then she thought about Maya Vasquez and the 2 million others who had died on New Harmony. The scale was different, but the crime was the same. The Vreth had decided that human lives were worthless, and now humanity would show them the consequences of that decision. Alien intelligence networks detected the fleet as it entered the outer regions of Vreth space. The ships were unlike anything in their databases, and their speed and power readings made no sense. Warnings were sent to the Vreth military command, but the admirals dismissed them as sensor errors. What could humans possibly do? They laughed. Humans were vermin, and vermin did not threaten empires as the fleet drew closer to its target. Tanaka ordered all ships to prepare a message that would be broadcast across the galaxy after the operation was complete. She recorded it herself, sitting straight in her command chair with the stars visible behind her. "To all species who share this galaxy with humanity, I am Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the United Terran Navy. And by the time you receive this message, the Vreth Dominion will no longer exist." She paused and let those words settle before continuing. 6 weeks ago, the Vreth murdered 2,300,000 of our people on the colony world of New Harmony. They killed our families and burned our cities and sent us a message calling us vermin who needed to learn our place. They believed we would accept this slaughter and retreat in fear. Her eyes hardened as she spoke the next words. They were wrong. For 2 centuries, humanity has hidden its true strength from the galaxy. We appeared weak because we chose to appear weak. We accepted insults and dismissal because we knew that showing our power would only invite conflict. But the Vreth have forced our hand, and now you will see what humanity is truly capable of. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a cold and steady tone. You called us vermin, and perhaps you were right. Vermin survive plagues and predators and every attempt to exterminate them. Vermin adapt to any environment and overcome any obstacle. And when you corner vermin, when you threaten their nests and slaughter their young, vermin bite back. The recording ended and Tanaka sat in silence for a long moment. Commander Chun approached and reported that the fleet was entering the final approach. The Vreth home system was only hours away, and soon there would be no turning back. Tanaka stood and straightened her uniform. All hands to battle stations. She ordered. Today we show the galaxy that human lives have value, and we make certain that no one ever forgets the price of taking them. The Black Armada moved forward into the darkness, and the stars themselves seemed to tremble at what was coming. The Vreth home system had never known war. For 5,000 years, no enemy had dared to approach their sacred worlds, and the very idea of an attack seemed impossible to a species that had conquered dozens of star systems without defeat. Archon Thalvex stood in the command center of Vreth Prime and reviewed reports from across the Dominion. The humans had gone silent after his message, just as he had predicted, and other species were already sending gifts and tributes to honor the Vreth victory. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Then the alarms began to scream. Officers shouted reports that made no sense. 400 unknown vessels had appeared at the edge of the system, and they were approaching the inner worlds at speeds that should have been impossible. The signatures matched nothing in the Vreth database. Thovavs demanded answers, but none of his subordinates could provide them. No species had ships that fast. No species had technology that advanced. No species would dare attack the Vreth homeland. The defense fleet scrambled to intercept the invaders. 800 warships that had crushed rebellions and conquered empires formed a wall between the unknown vessels and the inhabited worlds. Their commanders were confident and eager for battle. That confidence died quickly. Human fleet did not slow or hesitate as it approached the Vreth defenders. Admiral Tanaka gave a single order, and her ships opened. Fire with weapons that burned through Vreth. Shields like they were made of paper. The battle lasted 11 minutes in. Those 11 minutes, 800 Vreth warships were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Not a single human vessel was damaged. Not a single human life was lost. The Vreth crews had no time to understand what was killing them before they were. Gonfalvex watched the destruction on his screens with growing horror. He had studied every known species in the galaxy, and none of them possessed weapons like these. The humans were supposed to be weak and primitive, but the ships he saw were more advanced than anything the Vreth had ever built. He ordered his communications officer to open a channel to the enemy fleet. Perhaps there was still time to negotiate, to offer concessions, to find some way to stop what was happening. Admiral Tanaka appeared on his screen, and for a long moment they simply looked at each other across the void. Then she spoke in a voice as cold as the space between stars. Archon Thalvex, we received your message. The one you sent after you murdered our people and burned our colony. You told us to crawl back to our home and accept our place as vermin beneath your feet. Thalvex tried to speak, but she continued without pause. We have no response for you. We have no demands and no terms and no interest in your surrender. We are not here to negotiate or conquer or teach you a lesson. We are here to end you." The channel closed and Thalvex felt true fear for the first time in his long life on the Bridge of the Remembrance. Admiral Tanaka gave the order that would change the galaxy forever. Activate the Helios Array, the weapon deployed from the cargo bay of her flagship. Its silver spheres and golden rings unfolding like a mechanical flower. Energy began to build within its core, and readings across the human fleet showed power levels that climbed beyond anything the crew had ever seen. The array fired beams of pure energy, lanced across the void, and struck the Vreth star in precisely calculated patterns. They penetrated the outer layers and reached deep into the core, triggering reactions that nature had never intended. The star began to die on Vreth Prime. The sky changed. The familiar yellow light of their sun shifted to orange and then to angry red. Scientists screamed warnings that no one could understand, and civilians looked up in confusion at a sight that should have been impossible. The star was expanding. Thelvevs ordered an evacuation, but there was nowhere to go. The human fleet had positioned itself to block all escape routes, and even if ships could reach orbit, there was no outrunning what was coming. The Vreth had hours at most before their entire system was consumed. He tried one more time to contact the human admiral and beg for mercy. Surely they would not kill billions of innocent people for the actions of one fleet. Surely they were better than this. Tanaka accepted the communication and listened to his pleas without expression. When he finished, she spoke only 4 words: "You started this war." The channel closed for the final time. As the hours passed, the star continued to swell. Radiation levels rose across all 3 Vreth worlds, and temperatures climbed beyond anything their infrastructure could handle. Billions of Vreth huddled in shelters and prayed to gods who could not help them. On the 3rd planet, a young Vreth child named Kira held her mother's hand and asked why the sky was so red. Her mother had no answer, because there was no answer that would make sense to a child. She simply held her daughter close and told her that she loved her. In the command center, Thalvex watched his empire die. He thought about the humans he had ordered killed on New Harmony, about the message he had sent to Earth calling them vermin. He had believed so strongly that they were beneath him, that their lives meant nothing, that they would accept their fate. He had been wrong. And now his entire species would pay for his arrogance. The star detonated. There was no escape from what came next. A wave of fire and radiation expanded outward at a fraction of the speed of light, consuming everything in its path. The outer planet died first, its atmosphere stripped away in seconds. Its surface scoured clean of every living thing. The 2nd planet followed moments later. Its cities and monuments and history erased as completely as if they had never existed. 12 million years of Vreth civilization vanished in a heartbeat. Vreth Prime was the last to fall. Thalvex stood at the window of his command center and watched the wall of fire approach. In his final moments, he thought he understood something about the species he had underestimated. They were not vermin. They were something far more dangerous. The fire reached him, and in an instant, he was gone. Along with 7 billion others who had called that world home, Admiral Tanaka watched from the Bridge of the Remembrance as the Vreth system burned. Tears fell from her eyes, but her voice remained steady as she recorded the final log. Operation complete. All 3 Vreth worlds have been neutralized, and the Vreth Dominion is effectively destroyed. 12 billion enemy casualties, 0 human casualties. This is Admiral Tanaka signing off. She closed the channel and sat in silence while her crew celebrated around her. They had done what they came to do, and they had avenged their fallen people. But she knew that victory and justice were not the same thing. The Shadow Fleet turned and began the long journey home, leaving behind a dying star and the ashes of a civilization that had believed itself eternal. The galaxy would never be the same. The message reached every corner of the galaxy within days. Admiral Tanaka's recording played on screens across hundreds of worlds. and the footage of the Vreth star exploding spread faster than any news in galactic history. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The Collective Council of Elder Races called an emergency session to address what they termed the greatest atrocity in recorded history. Ambassadors screamed at each other across the chamber as they debated how to respond to humanity's actions. Some demanded immediate military intervention, while others argued that attacking Earth would only invite the same fate no one could agree on. Anything except fear. The Vreth Dominion had ruled their territory for 5,000 years. They had fleets and armies and resources that should have made them untouchable. And yet humanity had erased them in a single day with weapons that no one knew existed. If humans could do that to the Vreth, what could they do to everyone else? Chancellor Marcus Webb addressed the galaxy 1 week after the attack, standing before cameras in the same hall where he had authorized Protocol Prometheus. His face was tired, but his voice was strong. I speak to you today, not with pride or triumph, but with the weight of what we have done. The Vreth Dominion no longer exists, and 12 billion souls have perished because of decisions made in this hall. We do not celebrate this outcome, but we do not apologize for it either. He paused and looked directly into the camera. For 200 years, humanity tried to find our place in this galaxy, peacefully. We extended our hands in friendship to every species we encountered, and in return, we received contempt and dismissal and warnings to know our place. We accepted this treatment because we hoped that patience and diplomacy would eventually earn us respect. His expression hardened as he continued. The Vreth answered our patience by murdering 2 million of our people. They burned our colony and sent us a message telling us we were vermin who deserved extermination. They believed that slaughtering our children would teach us to submit. Instead, it taught us that there can be no peace with those who see us as prey. He straightened his shoulders and spoke the words that would define humanity's place in the galaxy for centuries to come. Let this stand as our first and final warning to every species who shares the stars with us. Humanity does not seek war, but we will never again be victims. Our children are not acceptable casualties, and our worlds are not lessons to be taught. If you come for us with hostile intent, we will not respond in kind. He leaned forward slightly, and his voice dropped to something cold and absolute. We will respond in total. The message ended, and the galaxy fell into a new and uncertain. Some species condemned humanity as monsters and called for their isolation from galactic society. They formed coalitions and wrote treaties promising mutual defense against human aggression. But those coalitions never found the courage to act because everyone remembered what happened to the Vreth species, saw opportunity in humanity's display of power. Ambassadors arrived at Earth, seeking alliances and trade agreements with the newly revealed superpower. They brought gifts and flattery, and promises of eternal friendship. The humans accepted their visits, but made no promises in return. They had learned the value of patience, and they would not be fooled by fair-weather friends. Admiral Yuki Tanaka retired from the Navy 6 months after the operation. She had given 50 years of her life to preparing for a day she hoped would never come. And now that it had passed, she found herself unable to continue. She moved to a small house on the coast of Japan and spent her days watching the ocean and tending a garden. Visitors were rare, and she preferred it that way. The memories of what she had done would stay with her until the day she died. Sometimes she dreamed of the Vreth child named Kira, the one whose story had been recovered from data fragments after the attack. A little girl who had asked her mother why the sky was red, who had died never understanding that her people's arrogance had doomed them all. Tanaka would wake from those dreams with tears on her face, and she would walk to her garden and dig in the dirt until her hands were raw. The work helped her remember that she was still human, that she could still create life Instead of destroying it, she never regretted what she had done. But she never forgot the cost either. On the anniversary of New Harmony's destruction, a new colony was established on a world called Hope's Landing. 300,000 humans made the journey to begin again, to build homes and raise families under an alien sky. Among them was a woman named Sarah Chun and her daughter Lily. Sarah had lost her sister on New Harmony, and she had spent the years since grieving and wondering if humanity deserved to survive after what they had done in revenge. But watching Lily play in the fields of their new home, she found her answer: humanity was not defined by a single act of terrible vengeance. They were defined by their ability to keep going, to build and grow and reach for the stars despite everything that tried to stop them. The Vreth had tried to break them and failed. And now humans would continue doing what they had always done. They would survive in orbit above Hope's Landing. A squadron of shadow fleet ships maintained constant watch. They were a reminder that humanity would never again be caught defenseless, that every colony and every citizen was now protected by power that could break empires. The other species of the galaxy watched and remembered, and feared. In the years that followed, humanity's position changed dramatically. They were no longer the young race to be dismissed and dominated, but a force that even the oldest empires treated with respect. Trade flourished and diplomatic relations improved as former enemies became cautious partners, not because the galaxy had suddenly developed affection for humans, but because they understood the alternative. Sarah Chun stood in the amber fields of Hope's Landing and watched her daughter chase butterflies through the tall grass. The sun was warm and the wind was gentle, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful. She thought about Elena Vasquez, who had probably stood in similar fields on New Harmony, watching her own daughter play. She thought about all the parents who would never watch their children grow up because the Vreth had decided human lives were worthless. Those parents had been avenged. But vengeance could not bring them back. Sarah called out to Lily as the sun began to set, telling her it was time to go home. Lily complained the way all children complain, but she ran back to her mother and took her hand. Together they walked toward their new home under an alien sky. And above them, the black ships kept their eternal watch. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and humanity would make certain they never forgot.